Hello, and welcome to another class presentation. In this video, we are going to be talking about Cluster 4 Safety and Risk under the Diploma of Leadership and Management. Now, I would like to start with my own practical experience on work health and safety. When I started out in a role as manager, I really didn't have a deep understanding of work health and safety. I did know a few things. I knew that based on induction and previous work experience that, safety is important, and it's about keeping ourselves safe and everyone else that we work with safe. But I didn't really have a lot of understanding on the technical requirements or the legal requirements, and how I could pretty much get the information I needed to efficiently manage safety and risk at the workplace. I also didn't know anything about building a safety culture. Those things were quite new to me. Those terms were new to me. But as I went through the motions of managing my team, I realized that I was spending a lot of time managing risk in the business and spending a lot of time managing incidents at work. And I thought there must be a better way of managing safety and risk. So what I did was I reached out to our health and safety officer and asked her, where can I find more information? How do I gain a much deeper understanding of work health and safety? She pointed out to me Safe Work Australia, where I found quite a lot of information about our legal obligations and what are the other sources of information that I would need to know. It is not enough to rely on the business operators, business owners, to give us the information we need on our legal obligation. It is our obligation to know this. Ignorance isn't an excuse when it comes to the law. So today, I would like to give you some basic elements on how you could learn more about work health and safety, and how it actually helps build a strong culture whereby as a manager, you're there with your team proactively managing safety and risk at the workplace. First, we need to know about your legal obligations. And the best way to do that is to have a look at this pyramid right here. So on the screen, you're going to see that the Act is on top of everything else at the bottom. These are the sources of information on how you can meet your obligations. As a worker, as a manager, even as businesses, they look into this, and the first bit that they should look at is the Act. Now, for each state, there are different acts. As you can see right here, for Queensland, Tasmania, New South Wales, Northern Territory, and South Australia, they all follow the Work Health and Safety Act 2011. For Victoria, it's the Occupational Health and Safety Act 2004. For Western Australia, it is operating under Work Health and Safety Act 2020. Now, as we go into this pyramid, we can see that there are several other publications. And when I say publications, these are different sources of information that could help you understand what your obligations are in the type of industry that you belong to, the business operations as well. So after the Act, it is actually supported by more publications. We're starting off with regulations and mandatory standards. Now, when we say regulations, this will all depend on the industry that you belong to. In Sonic Health, it is healthcare. So we look at different regulations that are applicable to the industry that you're in. Mandatory standards absolutely say what those are. These are, mandatory, and it is not optional. So it's good to know what these standards are that are placed upon us in the healthcare industry. Then, apart from the regulations and mandatory standards, we have the codes of practice and the non-mandatory standards, which means they're optional. But the codes of practice actually are admissible in court. So if found that you're in breach or you have neglected your duties on work health and safety, they refer to the codes of practice on specific details on what tasks relate to that breach on work health and safety. So codes of practice is important. We have different experts that have come together and they have identified safe practices, safety measures in terms of specific tasks such as manual handling, hazardous chemicals. There's so many others. And even consultation, participation, and cooperation is a code of practice, which generally all of us would have to comply with. Now, remember, the codes of practice are actually there to support the act. Now, the guidance material is another thing. So it's another source of information on how we could apply best practice in terms of work health and safety and risk management. So, you have a lot of sources of information that you could read and understand, and you have yourself and a health and safety officer that you could approach and just ask them about things that you don't understand in terms of the requirements that you need to meet as a manager. As a manager in Sonic Health Plus, you have Riskman, you have your safety audit, you have a lot of things that you need to do. But before you complete any of those, it is important that you actually understand what these mean. The risk of not being able to understand and you completing certain things by just asking other colleagues, I should say, is there, because you might actually have a very subjective way of answering or completing reports, when clearly we are dealing with the law. There are so many things that we need to prove as evidence that we did not neglect, or we actually didn't take the initiative to know what our legal obligations are. It is not on the business operator or the owner to train us. It's not just that. It's part of what they do as an administrative control for their staff and their teams. But as a worker yourself, you have your own professional and personal responsibility on the safety of others and yourself when you're at the workplace. So you are expected to know what your legal obligations are. Okay, so we all have our duties. Now, we actually go by what you call a work health and safety management system. So after going through the triangle of the requirements by the law, we go to the organization. Now, every single organization is different, that have to create their own safety management system on how they could follow their or meet their obligations as said on the act. So they would create a system on how the entire business would have to demonstrate, okay, that they are compliant to their legal obligations and they're meeting their legal obligations. And it's mixed up with, the ISO quality audit, because you have risk management that is supported by ISO, and you've got work health and safety as well. So you're putting those two together to create what you call the standards in the organization. It's like a roadmap. Okay. Now, when we have the safety management system, which is determined by the Work Health and Safety Committee of that business, we then have a plan to follow. Okay, so these plans are there to give us guidance. All the procedures are there on that plan, and it's a plan whereby we can go, okay, there are certain different aspects of the business. How can we all contribute to meeting our legal obligations on work health and safety. Okay? So we have the system, and then we have the plan. And after that, we then go to what you call understanding what the consequences are when businesses are either displaying reckless conduct or proven to be reckless in their conduct on work health and safety. And there's also what you call the breach. Now, reckless meaning they know what their legal obligation is and they still chose to do the wrong thing. So that is reckless conduct. So it's not really about just not doing the wrong thing mistakenly or unintentionally. It's actually proving intent not to comply with the requirements, and there's very big penalties when it comes to having this reckless conduct being proven. And with corporations, it's about 3 million. Individuals as a PCBU or the persons operating the business unit, and officers on health and safety can be asked to pay $600,000 or 5 years in jail. And we have individuals. So when we say individuals, is everyone else that have contributed to that reckless conduct. And that would mean workers, just about anyone in that workplace who contributed to that. And it's about $300,000 in penalties and 5 years in jail. So you can see that it's not just the business that's going to suffer. Okay, so there are risks to all the duty holders, owners of the business, officers, senior executive, managers, workers, visitors. Okay, so we've got that. Now, we've got category 2, which is not as high as category 1 under reckless conduct. We're now going to look at breach of high risk. And when we talk about high risk, it means that the impact to the breach or not following the policy, the procedure, the corporation is actually up for a 1.5 million penalty. Officers at about 300,000, and workers such as us, it's about 150,000 per individual. Now, if the breach is there and it's been proven, but the risk is not too high, so it's manageable, you still are exposed to risk of paying $50,000 as an individual if you are part of that, and officers about 100,000, and the business at 500,000. Okay, so what happens if, just for example, the business has given you the training that you needed for that particular procedure, and they can prove that they have given training and they've been monitoring it, but then for whatever reason you had been in breach, okay, of that particular policy or process, even if you have other reasons such as limited resources, which is possibly within your control, and you just didn't have it at that moment in time, and something happened, an incident happened or somebody got injured, and it goes to court, you are going to be fined 50,000. The corporation may not be fined because they have given you enough training and they have given you enough supervision, but you still, were in breach of that policy or procedure that you were meant to follow. So, everyone could be penalized, or some, or one. So it's important that we understand that everyone that are in the workplace, that would be the workplace, and who have participated or contributed in a particular breach or conduct that does not comply or follow the law is exposed to such penalties. Now, it's important that as a manager, you create a culture of participation, cooperation within your team, not just because it is a legal requirement, okay, under the Act, but because you want to build a strong culture. Now, building a strong work health and safety culture within your team allows you to become more efficient in managing safety and risk, because you are managing risk and safety from the level of where your teams are. You're not going to be there 24/7. It is important that they find work health and safety to be of extreme importance when it comes to business operations before problems fall on your lap. So if you have a workforce who are clearly committed to building and maintaining a very safe place for everyone concerned, then all you need to do as a manager is to guide them, direct them, make sure they understand and improve their understanding and knowledge of work health and safety, as well as support them. So it's more of a supportive role rather than you doing everything. And I think it's just not sustainable. So it's important that your team is with you in terms of your commitment on work health and safety. It starts with you as a manager. Be a role model, work on your knowledge and understanding of work health and safety, and impart that knowledge to your team. So to actually look into the organization's requirements, so you understand the system, standards, the plan, and different requirements of the business. For Sonic Health Plus employees, it isn't difficult. You just go to the internet and you will find that there is a page dedicated for it called Sonic Safe. You get into it and you will find so many different sources of information, like what are the recording and reporting responsibilities of staff when it comes to work health and safety. There's also about hazard management. How do we manage risk? Okay, how do we assess risk? What do we use, like a risk template, for example? So it's not enough to just ask another colleague about what they know on work health and safety. It's not sufficient to assume that you know enough. It's actually good to be guided first with whatever source of information you can find within the organization. And then, make sure that you understand your legal obligations. I remember one time when I was asked to do a safety audit, and as a manager, I was meant to do a monthly workplace inspection, and we called it OSH at that time. And I was ticking the boxes. I would say, for example, the one you see on the screen, it says automatic doors, and yes, we did have automatic doors where I worked. And I looked at it and I say, is it closing too quickly? No, it seems to be fine. There had been no complaints. And I just ticked the box and off I went to the next item. And I only flagged the ones that have been raised in the meetings on work health and safety, such as, a desk that needs fixing, or lack of a footstool, and just minor things, common things, and because that was my knowledge on work health and safety was so limited, I was just really ticking the boxes and hoping the report doesn't come back and my health and safety officer doesn't ask me for more information. I did get the point. The point was that when I tick that box, okay, and if I haven't done enough research and have not made the necessary checks, I was putting my staff at risk and myself at risk. Say, an example for this is automatic doors don't close too quickly. Yep, it's easy to have a look at the doors and say, yep, it's not, and then tick the box. But actually, there's more to it. There are many controls in place to make sure that certain items or features in your workplace is managed and maintained well to keep everyone safe. What I did check was, when was the last time those doors were checked? Okay. I didn't check as well as if there were any historical written reports about incidents related to the automatic door. Didn't check that. All I did was I saw it was fine and I ticked the box. Now you have to know that there are other checks that you need to do. And it all depends on the item that you see in front of you. If you are not sure, you'll have to ask your health and safety officer, what were the controls put in place for these particular things for you to have a look at? So ask for guidance. Every organization is different, and the controls they use would be different as well. So it doesn't hurt to find out, when I'm looking at this list, what are the things that I need to look out for? And you ask your officer that, have evidence that you have, like an email, for example, that you've had that discussion with your officer. I mentioned that there are a lot of controls, and in work, in terms of risk management and safety, under work health and safety at the workplace, we control risk based on a hierarchy of risk control. Okay, now this is what we this is what we look at in terms of the effectivity and the types of control measures that we put for every single hazard, or potential hazard, okay, that we might find in the environment. An example would be, let's have a look at COVID. Okay, now when we talk about COVID, we think about isolation, which is number 3, and we think about masks, which is a personal protective equipment, okay, which is in number 6. Now, if those two are the only ones that pop up in your head, we can then say that isolation is more effective than personal protective equipment, which is at the bottom end of the hierarchy, the level. Okay, so it's at 6. Now, when you say PPE, it's actually the least effective way of protecting ourselves from risk of injury, illness, or anything else. So PPE is actually at the bottom of the list. What is most effective is number 1, elimination. So think about COVID. What was the most effective way of keeping everyone safe? Now, a lot of the clinics, what they had to do was cancel appointments or did telehealth appointments. Okay, so it's eliminating the chance of somebody walking in with the virus into the workplace. So that is absolutely much more effective than wearing a mask. Okay, someone with COVID walking in, okay, with a mask, the virus is still there. It's still in the environment. So elimination is always the most effective way of managing risk and controlling risk. Substitution is when you replace something, okay? Something that may not be safe to use, and you need to substitute it for something that is much more safer. Like, say, for example, you have a broken, there is an equipment that is broken, so you substitute it with something else that is much better and much safer until you find a replacement. So substitution is just a replacement. Okay, and then you've got isolation, which is what we all did during the the COVID crisis, when we all had to stay home, and it's exactly what it is. It's about removing something from the environment, okay, and putting it somewhere where no one could access it. And it's pretty much, it's a bit like elimination as well, but the equipment or something that you've got there is still inside the environment, just put away in a safe place. Okay, so it's limiting access to it, putting barricades, right? Putting signs all around it and a barricade, okay, so no one can actually reach that particular, use that particular equipment. That's isolation. Engineering controls is about putting something additional on an equipment or a machine to make it much safer, like an automatic shut button, okay? So, or, with doors, you can put something that could slowly close the door instead of it quickly shutting, So those are engineering controls. Now, the admin controls is what we see quite a lot of. It's about training that you get. It's about the induction that you get before you start. Anything that is communicated verbally or written, letting you know more about policies and procedures, are all admin controls. Okay, and other things like maybe rostering, making sure two people are always there so they could support each other. These are admin controls. And you know about PPE. It's anything that you use or wear that will protect you from the hazard. Okay, so hazard is something that will result to a risk. Risk is actually what's going to happen, you know, a risk of injury or a risk of illness. So that's a difference. A hazard is a broken chair or wet floor, for example. So those are hazards and obstacles. Okay, these are hazards. The risk of tripping. Okay, so it's an event that's going to happen because a hazard is present. So that's a difference. Now, pretty much what you've seen and heard today are just the basic elements. Remember that it's not just a business. Everyone has to play their part on work health and safety. We are all legally obligated to meet our legal obligations, okay? And to comply with what we are required to do to keep yourself safe and everyone safe. For more information about work health and safety, please go to Safe Work Australia. Have a look at your state. Okay, so there are different laws again, different acts for different states, and the regulations are there. Have a look at them. Have a look at the codes of practice. Have a look at safety data sheets on items and equipment and even chemicals that you use at work. Okay, have a look at contacting your health and safety officer if you need to ask questions. So you need to reach out to the people who are qualified to give you the best advice. And you know, Sonic Health Plus has given you that. Very easy to access. Just contact HR. Shauna is there to give you information, and you know, make sure that you understand what you need to do to keep yourself and everybody safe. So there you go, the basic elements of work health and safety. Thank you very much. Next topic would be about risk assessment. How do you assess risk? How do you use the risk matrix? Things that are very important for you as a manager so you know what sort of controls would be appropriate for certain risk. Thank you. Until the next time.